All right, Coach V, thank you so much for joining me here today. I'm really excited to chat with you. You're somebody who has had a big influence on my career and who I've always looked up to. So, really excited to get a chance to chat with you. And I want to start early in your career, even before you became a coach, because you had somewhat of a unique family circumstance where you took on a parental role for your siblings at a very young age. I think you may have still been in high school or just had graduated. So, kind of take us back, and I just want to know if that unique family circumstance in that parental role had any influence on your decision to pursue being a football coach.
Well, first of all, thank you, Evan, for having me. It's very exciting to be here, and I look forward when anytime you get a chance to share with people. You value their time. I'm a cliche guy, and I always talk about time being valuable, and it's only just a minute, only 60 seconds in it was forced upon me. Can't refuse it. Didn't seek it or didn't choose it, but it'll give account if I abuse it. So hopefully, I'm valuable with my time, and I'm pertinent with the information being conveyed. But yes, I had some unique challenges growing up. And that is something that's been incorporated into everything I teach now. And that is, you don't have problems in your life, you have challenges, and you accept them as challenges. And especially in the world of sports, that's how you accept things, and you rise to the occasion when they occur. But my dad, I was one of five brothers. My dad passed away when I was 8 years old. Killed in a car accident, and as we went forward, my mother was had a aneurysm, a stroke, when I was in the eighth grade, and she passed away Christmas Eve night, my senior year, and I was 17 at the time. So at that point in time, really became the figurehead of the family. And as I've always said, I didn't raise my brothers; we raised each other. Meaning, we cooperated, we stayed together, we believed in each other, and all those things are things that I try to incorporate into my teachings day to day. It's talking about people caring for each other. It's talking about people understanding each other, knowing that everybody's facing different challenges, different circumstances, and going through day to day activities. There's going to be a lot of things that come up to where we have to respect the other people's space and understand their time and understand that they're what they're dealing with. So that was valuable. And then what really helped me was coaches helped me stay on track at that point in time. They became mentors to me. They became teachers. So as I got into school, and that was who got me into college, was some coaches, and they said, "Look, there's another way to go." And I talk about this in my teaching students, the young people that are in high school. I said, "Look, you're going to have to separate yourself some kind of way in the future. College is a way, the military is a way, technology is a way. There's the trades, being air conditioner experts, plumbers, all this. But what you want to do when you talk to people is always give them as many insights to opportunities that are actually out there that they may not have thought of. Just making sure that the number one thing is you're positive, you're bringing energy to the table. And that's what I think I learned at that point in time. You can't throw yourself a pity party. You have to look at everything as, and again, that was a coach that I had in the early days. He always talked about, that was his big thing. He was an old Marine sergeant. He always talked about execution, and having energy, and having enthusiasm, and that great effort. Those things stuck with me. And then he hit me with something one day when I was not doing maybe the best I could. That mantra stayed with me for the rest of my life was, you have to look at it, son, like with the boy you were, be proud of the man you are. And that's one of the things you can self evaluate every day. With the little girl you were, be proud of the lady you've become. With the little boy that you were, be proud of the man that you are. And those sometimes those questions are hard to answer. But they again, anytime you can bring yourself back to square and have a cornerstone you go on, then I always think you got that foundation is valuable.
Yeah, that's really neat. And how did you develop this? In other words, like, was there a coach that had kind of like helped you build this foundation? Or was this something that you kind of learned on your own as you evolved through being in the coaching profession?
I think the coaching profession has been a foundation for me. It's been extremely valuable because when you got into it, you saw so many different. You were in an office. I started as a junior high football coach. Then I was a high school coach. I taught biology, chemistry, physical science. What you started to understand was I was watching the coaches around and their different approaches to young people. And it was one thing a coach told me one time. He said, "You got to understand, even you can learn something from even the worst teacher or the worst coach. Don't know that they're the worst. It's just, are their communication skills the best?" And that's what I started to differentiate. And what you start learning is how it's so much is in the delivery, so much is in the approach. You and I talking today, if somebody's watching me right now, that, if I'm monotone or I'm one of those guys, you and I have talked about this, you know me for years, man, I talk like 9 auctioneers sometimes. I mean, I am really going at it. And I'm one of those deals that I just believe you got to try to make, one of the things, if you can do something every day, is that's have somebody smile that's involved with you. Because you make their day, and it's not that hard to do, but we tend to get so caught up in ourselves. Like I said, I keep going back to my day-to-day teachings. You want people to come around you and say, just start smiling when they see you come. They go, wow, this guy's he's always got energy. He's usually got something to liven the story up, and have people excited. And like I said, I just think over the years I was around some great coaches. Jack Pardee was a fantastic coach. My very first coach, Bobby Edwards, was a guy that I loved because, again, his every day with him, it seemed like it was Christmas. And I think a lot of us enjoy what you do. And the biggest thing that I've noticed that where if I saw somebody that I didn't think was a very good teacher and maybe a very good coach was, did they enjoy people? Were they comfortable with people? You know what I mean? And I think that's one of the things, as I've known you and watched you grow in your career. You're a very caring person. You're very comfortable around people. You're very insightful when you talk to people. And again, you're very direct. You have a quality that I don't have, and that's that you keep things on an even keel. I probably get excited like a little kid on recess, start running around and never stop and that kind of thing. Yeah, I think you develop it over the coaches that I've been around. Jeff Fisher, great coach, when I was with the Tennessee Titans, and every one of them had different qualities. And then you're very, very fortunate. I was blessed to be around so many guys, and then start developing. Okay, this is the monitor. This is the path I'm going to try to take.
Right. And I think so oftentimes in leadership, especially, you're trying to find your authentic voice, but you're also in a way trying to model yourself after the really great coaches and leaders that you're around. You mentioned Jack Pardee, and I know you spent a lot of time at the University of Houston, in particular at a time when they were really kind of at really one of their first pinnacles in college football. And, a couple of really great quarterbacks that they had back to back, a year where they went 10-1 and were one of the top teams in the nation. Kind of talk about being there during that time at the University of Houston and what stood out to you about that team that kind of allowed them to separate from the rest of the competition.
I think and talk about Coach Pardee. One of the things I learned from him, and I think it's been a cornerstone again for me, is a great leader is a servant. A great leader adheres to the people around him. A great leader is not here saying, "Look at me." A great leader is saying, "What can I do for you? What part do I play in your success? How do I enhance what you're trying to get done?" And Coach Pardee just made, a simple statement, but he goes, if it weren't for these young people here, what would we be doing? What can we do to help these people? We've been in the spotlight. Of course, he'd been in more of the spotlight, of course, than I had. And I was very fortunate to be on a staff there where it was Bob Young, it was Pat Thomas, and Carl Hargrave. We had, Jimmy Warren, Ron Shanklin. Every guy that I just named was an NFL guy. A couple of them had Super Bowl rings, like Ron Shanklin. And again, I was blessed because again, I got to watch these people and how did they come from where they were to where they are? And some of those would come back and say, "Wow, coach, look where you came from." I said, and then I learned the deal about it's a pretty simple formula when you really get down to it. And that's kind of treat people like you want to be treated and find out what it is that they're what's happening in their life, where are they trying to get, what are their goals. And when you start to look at it, because all you've done is taken yourself out of the formula. And the biggest thing I think from Coach Pardee, it wasn't really a mantra as much as he talked about being a family. And a family deal, man, I later had that I like to hear too was a little cliche off family, or a little deal was, forget about me, I love you. And that was the family. If you spell it out, forget about me, I love you. And when I thought about that team, it was a bunch of young people that didn't really know how successful they could be, but our communication was great. We began to caring for each other. We had trusted each other. These are all foundations of any great team, any great company. Started to have a respect for each other. And, and then we came up and you develop what I call the love. And that's when I develop when I tell somebody or I say something to somebody that I love you, that term gets thrown around quite a bit. And I've always defined it. I said, if I love you, number one, I respect you. Number two, I believe in you. And number three, I unconditionally accept you, because that's part of it. We've all got little chinks in the armor. We've all got our little idiosyncrasies. But when you say I love you, you say, look, I accept you for everything that you are. But number one, I believe in you. Number two, I respect you. And, so those are, my wife always says, well, that's real romantic. I said, well, I don't know, but it covers all the bases. I believe in you. I respect you, but you're not going to dishonor you, if you know what I mean. But I think when you get something like that, then again, I keep going back to what are the foundations and what are the pillars or what are the cornerstones that are going to lead to your success? And then you can always go back to them. Am I following my path? Am I following my recipe? Am I following my outline? And I think those are vital for when you look at successful teams. And I thought that was what Coach Pardee was so great at, was keeping things even keel and going back to a foundation and saying, hey, listen, these are the things that are going to be important to us. And the football part will take care of itself. And there was just so many segues. And I worked with there at Houston and later on in a Canadian football league. But yeah, I was very, very fortunate to be around a man like that. That was, again, he came out of obscurity. He was out of a little place called Cristobal, Texas, and played six-man football, and then went on to A&M, and then went on to greatness as a pro and as a coach.
Yeah, and you touched on so many things there that I could go off, on tangents here. But I do want to touch on one thing because when I was early in my career, and we met at my first college job when I was 22 years old at SMU, and you were the offensive line coach there, and you used to always say something that I heard but I didn't quite understand. And you used to always say, people don't know, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I know you said that a lot, and I didn't understand it when I was a young coach, right? It was just something that Coach V says all the time. And as I've grown older and as I've matured in my own leadership, that is without question the most profound piece of coaching that I experienced in my football career, because it really does encompass everything about the relationship of a coach and a player. And it is 100% true. You have to create that connection with the people you lead. And I just wanted to let you know that, all these years later, it finally hit me what you were trying to tell us, or at least what you were trying to tell the guys, that I finally understood years later.
Well, thank you. And again, I used to simplify that. I talk to young coaches now about invest in people, or people that are running companies. You've got people that are working for you. Invest in them. Find out about them. And especially if they're married and have children. Number one, their children are their treasures, and that's vital that you know that. But and be genuine with it too. And that's not hard to do. If again, because that goes back to treating people like you want to be treated. But exactly, athletes and players that have played for you, if they're smart enough to know that if especially, and I've gotten better in adhering. Again, it's always brought me back to square with young people. As I've coached them from junior high to NFL. I've been blessed to coach seventh graders and millionaires, but they still want to know that you care about them as a person, and you'll get so much more out of them. Or you'll help them reach their goals. And to say you get so much more out of them. See, again, we as coaches sometimes get lost, about, well, I've got to get him to, do this. Well, let's see how we can get him to be a better person for himself. And then I think everything else will take care of itself.
Yeah. And one of the things that I've always admired about you, Coach V, is communication. And I know you've already been talking about it here to start our conversation. And you mentioned genuine interest. I mean, this goes back to basic Dale Carnegie, how to make friends and influence people. Like just having genuine interest in the people that you deal with day to day. It's sometimes shocking at how little genuine interest you can see sometimes, and it's so easy to do. It's nothing that's difficult. It really just takes a moment of getting out of your own head or focusing on yourself and just focusing on the other person. And I know you coach in the NFL, and it sometimes is a little different coaching pro players, or as you said, the millionaires, because it's kind of a different game, right? Like, it's about getting to the game on Sunday. It's about giving them the opportunity to perform. Sometimes you don't have as much of an impact on those players as you might a seventh grader or a college age player who's still developing and maturing, talk about your experience there. I mean, did these principles kind of hold true in your experience in the NFL, or was it kind of like I was describing, where it was a little bit of a different situation when you are in the professional ranks?
I think it's different in a little bit. A lot of them have developed, their thoughts and their process of how they do things. But I thought a lot of them were very receptive to things because one of the things that I noticed up there, they were professionals. They began to see, hey, I've got to work hard now to keep myself at this pinnacle. I've got to do some things. And what the good ones and Coach Party taught me this up there too and Coach Fisher was, they're going to look for how can you help them. They were looking for it more at that point. Whereas the young people were still learning the game. Maybe they're still maybe finding out that they want to be involved in this sport, whatever the sport was, track, basketball, volleyball, trying to see, trying their was for them. But of course, those were you're laying a foundation too. But I thought for the most part, I thought up there, a lot of them were receptive to a lot of things. If you would come up and present it, in the right fashion. And because, like I said, communication, the biggest challenge, and you have to self-evaluate. And that's one of my big things I talk about. Because communication, I have a hard time is listening and stopping myself and saying, wait, let me let this person talk. Let me let this person give their point of view. And I have to do that a lot to stop and say, hey, wait a minute, am I communicating or am I just talking? And but up there, I was excited about it. I enjoyed it. And again, a different venue from the way you present things, no doubt, if you know what I mean. Because you had so much stuff to get accomplished, for that game and everything and that season. But I just I think everywhere people are receptive. If again you're delivering if they think the message is pertinent, and you brought this up a couple of times about being concise, being very direct. Not just being an overloader like I've talked about. Sometimes I've watched guys talking in front of people, and it's just so monotone. I don't feel like there's anything being delivered. And again, I use that mantra up there about with the boy you were, be proud of the man you are. And then I have one that I raised my sons with, and it was another one. How you do anything is how you do everything. And how you do anything is how you do everything. It's another one of those self-respective deals where you look at the day and you go, wow, I could have done that a little bit better. There's little things that we all do to the day where we tend to go, I could have done that a little bit better. But it's another way of getting people, getting their attention, letting them saying, hey, are we really on task here? Are we really getting done what we want to get done? Or are we putting in the time? It was a neat
Yeah,
experience of that.
yeah, no question. And I have a very vivid memory very early in my coaching career. That's directly aligned with what you just said in terms of how you do one thing is how you do everything. And it was probably my first month at SMU football, and you had given me a small little assignment to do. And whatever it was to replicate something, and I gave it back to you. And it was pretty much what you asked for, but there were no hole punches in it. And I remember I gave it to you. I went back to my desk, and you followed me about 40 seconds later, and showed me what you had given me before, and showed me what I had given you, and basically had just told me like, hey, look, this is not what I asked for. And you didn't yell at me. You weren't a jerk about it. You just let me know that like, hey, you didn't do what I asked you to do. And that really stuck out to me. Like that was I was disappointed in myself for not delivering at the highest level. And that was indicative of the way that I approach my job moving forward, where it was like, I'm going to do everything I can to produce at the highest level and to dominate every single day. And you're 100% correct. Like how you do the little things is how you do everything. And I never wanted anything that I did or any of my work or any of my relationships to not be on par with the excellence that I had set forth for myself or that I was trying to get to. And you're 100% right. And I appreciate you as a leader and as a teacher for, communicating with me what was to be expected, where I didn't measure up, and then doing it in a way that kind of allowed me to correct it myself, Or you would have probably known about me moving forward that, like, okay, I probably can't give Evan this type of work because he's not going to deliver at the level that I need. So, just kind of a cool little insight into me as a 22, 23-year-old coach, and kind of being thrown into the cauldron, so to speak, and getting to learn from great coaches like yourself. So appreciate that lesson, Coach.
No, I appreciate it. Well, and that's what you always do. We always talk about attention to detail with our players, and focus. And so, again, we have to live, walk the walk, just per se, and preach. And I think that was what helped me because, again, I was one of those guys that just may not have been, the sharpest pencil in the box, maybe, but I always thought I could outwork people. And I thought that's what helped me kind of reach different levels. Was just saying, hey, let me know what it is you want, and we'll work hard. And I had some experiences just like yourself, but like that, where coaches come and say, "Is this what we talked about?" And I go, "Well, some of them may have been more abrupt than that." But that is something that why coaches and why people like you and I can help so many different people when they're team building, when they're building a company, when they're working with people. It's because we've been in an environment you're dealing with so many personalities, on a day-to-day basis. It's just, I coached the offensive line, and besides there in the secondary, that was the most people in the room. That was the most people as a unit that were on the field, and making sure that, again, because each one of them is going to have a unique way of learning. Some people got it through film, some people got it through reps, some people got it through when you drew things and they understood it. But finding what it is that helps, because every one of them had had good, unique qualities and were intelligent. But it's how do you best bring out what their best features are, or enhance it so they can best learn it and perform at the best level.
Yeah, and I really think that all sports teams are really mini organizations. You have a bunch of different departments. They all have their jobs to take care of, but they all feed into the bigger mission and the bigger goal of the team. And obviously, you have middle management, you have your assistant coaches, you have your head coach, CEOs, you have your young talent, that's your entry level jobs that they're all developing. So in a way, especially football, having 100, 120 people, or excuse me, players on the team, in addition to maybe another 30 to 50 staff, I mean, that is a mini organization for sure.
No
So
question.
I agree. These are all principles that definitely kind of transfer over, regardless of the industry or the environment. You're still dealing with people. And I know, like, when you were in the NFL, you were around some really great coaches. I know Mike Munchak is one of the really all-time great offensive line coaches in the NFL. You were around a lot of head coach guys that became head coaches: Jim Schwartz, Greg Williams. You mentioned Jeff Fisher. Just want to know if there were any that kind of like stood out to you, either from a leadership standpoint or the way that they approached their job, that you kind of took with you from those NFL experiences and were able to implement into your own coaching and leadership.
Oh, not a question. Coach Fisher again was, I thought he played the game, so he was at a real even keel. Did a good job of communicating. Was one of those guys that just kind of always, stayed, like I said. I think even keel like Coach Pardee. Had a great confidence about him. Had a good awareness with people and things like that. I thought Greg Williams was brilliant in the fact of his organization and court of his structure, and of course the way he taught. Jim Schwartz shared a lot of that. I thought both of those men were like that. You admired them for it to the nth degree. Being structured, being organized, knowing how to deliver a message, being short and concise. Those things you start taking away, and the way they were also, because of the way they delivered things, they kept the players excited. If you know what I mean. Greg Williams especially was one of a guy that could come into a room and start, you could just start feeling the room start to vibrate a little bit, if you know what I mean. Because
Mhm.
he was going to have energy, he was going to have enthusiasm, and then, like I said, then emphasizing the things that they had to do, and that was to and then pay attention. Those guys are instrumental, and you hope in each day you catch yourself and you're doing something Again, am I really on task here? Am I really struggling? I'm going into this. Am I prepared? Like I said, I thought that was one of the things and then they were just brilliant at the game. They would have been good at those kind of guys would have been good lawyers. They'd have been good at anything they did. It just happened to be that they were doing football. And Williams especially was instrumental in my upbringing. Because again, he worked his way up through the ranks, and you started to watch him, and again, watch his people skills, watch his work ethic. I keep going back to watch how structured he was, how always on task he was. So those were huge as you got up there, and it was easy. Like I said, you're running a big time organization. Any team you have is just what you said, and you've got so many different facets from the trainers, to the coaches, to the people, the doctors that you're going to deal with those players, nutritionists, things like that. There's a lot of personalities involved, and making every one of them feel like they're a part of that, not just associated. And I think that's a big difference. That's something we have to look at when we look at a day-to-day team building. Don't make people feel like, okay, you're associated with this, or you're intricately a part of this. And there's a good way an art to making people feel that way. But one of the things I took away from like a guy like Greg Williams was, being consistent. Consistency is better than greatness. Consistency is better than greatness, and that's a huge deal because people can talk about that. Are you consistently good at what you do? And because people around you appreciate that.
Yeah. And the consistency is not only what helps us through the tough times and through the challenges, as you said earlier, but it also helps us when we're winning and when we're dealing with success, which, really, if you break it down, is very similar to dealing with the challenges, right? Like you're going to have to get yourself back up and face that success and face that adversity. And I think sometimes that's overlooked. And, that is one of the traits of the really good teams is they're not resting on the success that happened this last week. Or if they lose, they're not going to let themselves lose to that same team twice. They're going to get better from that past game, and they're going to look to improve going into the next week. And I love that you pointed out the consistency and the teaching piece from Coach Williams and Coach Schwartz. I think that this is really big and oftentimes overlooked, especially in coaching. We always know that, we need players with a certain level of talent, but you also need to be able to give them the tools and give them an understanding of what you're trying to do as a coach. And the ability to communicate that, and like you said, being concise in getting guys excited about what it is you want them to learn is a really great trait, and not one that all coaches have, quite honestly. So that's really cool insight on some great coaches.
No, thank you. Like just overall, like you said, I think when you're around people day to day, there's so many people that can give you things that you come away with, and it's and some of the high school coaches and things that I've dealt with. I mean, like I said, each one of them will have a little deal that they say that I just excites me to see how they appeal to players, and just one of the things I try to preach now is just, especially after having a blessed career like I have, is having an attitude of gratitude. Just an attitude of gratitude, because there's so many positives you've got day to day. Like I said, any one of those things that people can, when you speak to people, they can grab onto and say, "Wow, that I can take on, I can hold that." As you talked about being concise coming up. When I coached last year, a couple of guys, and I heard a coach say something that was kind of, he said, "Coach, I love your challenge deal." And I said, "Okay." And he goes, kind of takes where I should say, so what now? And just talking about, hey, something bad happened. So what now? And I like that. How you going to react? And that was something that, again, when he heard challenge, he said, that's a challenge. So what now? And I just love the way he adhered that and told the players, move on. Move on. We got too much ahead of us to let this bog us down. And it was neat. And like I said, I talked in some FCA talks, and talking to players, and I think that's another thing too. I keep going back to foundations, back to pillars, back to being grounded, and talking to the players about having a faith to live by, a self to live with, and a purpose to live for. But again, when you keep pouring things out there, It's just no different than any classroom teacher in any subject. You never know what's going to be a key to those young people or to those people in the audience. Everybody can take some things away from and just keep presenting. And again, keep doing like we've talked about it so much in here with some energy and some enthusiasm.
Yeah.
But it's neat.
Yeah, I love that. And you've had the great fortune of coaching offensive line for a long period of time and been around some really great players. And maybe just touch briefly on what are the characteristics that make a great offensive lineman?
I think the offensive linemen are the most. I've always said this. I've coached the secondary and the offensive line. Those are my two position areas that I coached. And I think what it is, the secondary guys are extremely talented and they're bright. They have to be to play that position. The offensive linemen, the same thing. I don't think people get enough credit for being how smart those guys have to be in reacting. I've always said the closer to the ball you play, the faster you have to react, and the things have to happen. And what they are is they work in such a cloak of just being overshadowed, and they take pride in it. It's just like, hey, you know what? I know what my job is. I know how important I am. I don't need to be showered with a whole lot. Just, again, those are the group there. If they thought you cared about them, you got everything they had. And because they just knew, and they had that way of knowing, coach believes in what I'm doing here. He respects me, and everything that he's telling me to do. Because that position can be very tedious, very pragmatic. It takes time to do that. I was teased that your body was in a very uncomfortable position for most of the game. And like I said, those qualities were big. I used to tease him. I said, if you have a daughter, you wanted to marry an offensive lineman because he's a protector and he's a fighter and he's just a good person. He's going to have a great, demeanor about him as he goes forward. And I always talked about they just took great pride in what they did. And then I saw a deal one time that I really loved. And you and I talked about this at one point, and it was, and I'm so big into when I say something like, if I tell you I love you, define it. If I say something to you, define it. And I saw something one time that really stuck with me about being about pride. And it was saying if I had pride, and it broke it down into personally responsible for my individual dedication, desire, drive, effort, enthusiasm, execution, and energy. And I just thought, wow, that was a pretty good way to describe that. It just because again, other than that, you kind of use a word. And does it have a meaning to you? And then when you talk to the players, you say maybe they weren't at their best that day. Well, were you personally responsible for your dedication and drive day, or did you bring a lot of energy today, or did you have a lot of enthusiasm today? But now I go back to what I said. Do you care about them? Is there anything on your heart? Is there anything happening with you today? Or there's some outside factors being involved, if they're young kids in high school, are they doing good in class? What's their home life like? And if it's a pro player, I mean, you never know. He may have, his kids may be sick at home, or, there's different things happening with his family. So, like I said, as we talked earlier, when it keeps circling back, when you've got a foundation like that, now you know that you're going to have success. And like I said, I keep going back to very fortunate to be around a lot of men that taught me that over in those organizations, those environments.
That's great. And you may have already kind of touched on this, but being in that room, and you mentioned how offensive linemen overlooked at times on teams. The quarterbacks, the running backs, the skill players get a lot of the publicity. How do you bring a group of offensive linemen together? Or what's the common characteristic of those best offensive line groups that you've had the opportunity to coach?
Well, there's no unequivocally those guys. They have a bond. It's like a fraternity per se, and they begin to care for each other and about each other. You know, and back to square one. They know, hey, coach cares about us. He's invested in us. I mean, if it's like I said, even in high school, I said, what is your brother at home, mom and dad, your aunt, your grandma, how those people doing at the house, and then I always thought, obviously you've been around me. I love levity. I love to get them to smile every day, something, you know what I mean? And like I said, and just something where, and those guys are like that. That there's a camaraderie there, there's a caring there. And then they, the way they, like I said, I always thought their communication was outstanding because they knew they had to tell each other in a split second what was happening, and then come back after if it didn't go well, they burying it and coming back and saying, "Hey, look, let's regroup this," and talking to each other, not condemning each other. And that was vital in the secondary too. But the offensive line, like I said, is just a very unique bunch of players. Um, and like I said, letting them express themselves too, and because it becomes a long season. I think that's too where now that it helps you in coaching. Like I said, if you're not just that monotone guy, and I was very fortunate. I never was that guy. That real big on cliche guy and things like that, and getting them to get, like I said, trying to bring a smile to people's faces anytime you could.
Yes, 100%. That is one of my lasting impressions of our time working together, Coach, without question. And I want to kind of touch on, you've been a part of some really good football teams, some that, like we talked about, the top of college football, a team that played in the Super Bowl. But you've also been on the other end, just like I have, some teams that just didn't have the right combination of players, or just didn't finish with a record, that was satisfactory. And so I just want to hear from you. What is some of the commonalities and differences between those really great teams and then some of the other teams that you've been on?
I'll use a term here called chemistry. And when you're on a team, you can start feeling the chemistry of that team. And chemistry kind of defines as again, a caring and a communication, and a camaraderie, and a compassion. I mean, there's a lot of ways to describe that, but you start feeling it. And then on the teams that weren't, still a group of good men, still a group with a lot of qualities, but was that chemistry lacking? And what was it? Was it a communication? Was it a caring? Was it a camaraderie? Was it, was it a ability to maintain a consistency? And it's just so many. Like I said, I was so fortunate to be around Andre Juarez. Was a great quarterback, great leader. You still see him now on TV, and just a vibrant personality as he came out. And just the way he led from that standpoint. David Klinger led to a different mentality. He was a really tough guy, stoic guy, but you watched him. He was consistent in what he did. He was deliberate. He was always on task. He was, I think right now he's a minister. He's one of those guys that you could just draw from, and you looked at those teams and they usually had kind of a focal point, if you know what I mean. When we were really good at the Titans, McNair, we had so many different personalities there that you could have said, wow, these are bright stars, and the way they handle themselves, from Eddie George to, like I said, and all around the team, if you know what I mean. But what you just start to feel that chemistry, you start to feel that bond. And then on teams that just aren't, it's it's lacking, and you can't really inject it, if you know what I mean. It's got to kind of be player led, not coach fed. And those, like I said, not that there's not a great group of men, and not that they don't all share qualities, but how can we bring them together, and how can we best mesh them to where we're hitting at. And there's so many things that go into those seasons, from injuries to officials to schedules. Everything can play a part.
Of course. And I mean, you see this all the time in all types of sports, right? Like, it's not always the most talented team that wins. I mean, we're here in June 2021. We're in the middle of the NBA playoffs, and you would make the argument that a lot of the teams that are still standing, we're in the conference finals now. They're not the most talented teams out there, right? Like, this is the first time we haven't had LeBron James in the conference finals, and it's not always about having the most talent. But like you said, kind of like in those moments of adversity, are you about yourself, or are you about coming through for the person next to you? And I think that's something that I would echo in my own experiences, is that chemistry and that bond of a team was definitely present in those in the teams that I was a part of, that were able to kind of take that next step as a team. So 100% agree with you right there. And, I want to kind of like wrap up, because you've had this great career where you've, like you said, seventh graders to professionals, everything in between, every level possible, and been around great coaches. And you've talked a couple of times about the pillars and kind of your core characteristics that you think lead to success. And just kind of share what are some of those pillars, or kind of talk about your core beliefs that you believe lead to success as an individual and also building successful teams.
Well, and I really do. I believe this foundation is very important in whatever it is that people believe in. There's no doubt. And I call mine the chain of success. And the chain of success is interesting. All these are words that begin with a C, and it's character, and it's class, and it's courage, and it's commitment, and it's conviction, and it's communication, and it's compassion. And then you keep going on, and you find in the words like you and I talked about chemistry, but then you start to define them for, especially for young people. I'll define them. I'll say, hey, character is what you do in the dark. Character is what you do when no one would know. Class is how you represent your family name. Class is how, when somebody mentions Evan Burk or Ronnie Vinklarek, how's it going to be received? Courage is having the art of meeting failure but not being defeated, because we're all going to face that, and that goes back to my word challenge. It's going to be a challenge, and I'm up for that. Because anytime, I don't care what it is. Hey, my alarm didn't go off. Hey, first challenge. Now I've got to adapt, improvise, and overcome. Let's go with it. Commitment. The commitment is a goal with a deadline, and make them short and concise. I'm committed to something. I've got a goal. It's got a deadline. Other than that, it's a dream, and that's okay too. But put something on it. And then conviction is kind of incorporates the others. Is having the courage to stick with what you said. Having the discipline. And that's, I think, sometimes we lose the word discipline in this. We start thinking, and you say discipline, and people get negative. Like, wow, discipline is just having structure and organization and the conviction to stay within it. And so define it again. Compassion, simple understanding, and communication. Listen. And so I guess when I teach these foundations, I want them to again have a definitive, meaning to them that's not long and drawn out. And then everybody goes, damn, go back to my chain of success, my character and my class and my courage and my commitment, my conviction, my communication, my compassion, my consistency, which we've already said is better than greatness. And when you have a foundation like that, that's mine. That's what if I'm teaching and talking to your team or talking to your organization or talking to your group, I bring into it. And I think people can adhere to that because, and like I said, when they're defined, and they're defined concisely and deliberately and in a maybe one word way. Now, people can remember that, and you hope they can. Like I said, because again, one of my things that I've tend to do is drift too much. And like I said, you don't want to do that. You know what I mean? You want to make sure that the message is very deliberate, very concise. But now again, that chain of success, and wow, you could get me started on that one. As you well know, I could talk on that for quite a bit.
Yeah, coach. And I love everything you just said. The definition piece is so critical. I think we see a lot of times CEOs, head coaches, they get up in front of everybody, whether it's the team or the press, and they talk about culture or they talk about winning the right way. But what does that really mean? It's easy to say, yeah, we want to have a great culture here or a winning culture. Well, that doesn't mean anything. Like, we can't just have a mission statement on the wall and just point to that mission statement. It has to be something that we all understand and that we can live day to day. And I love how you break it down in such a clear and concise way where it's understandable and we know what the expectations are.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. Like I said, I think that's vital in any teaching we do, because that's what you and I hope to do, is hope to enhance people in every way we can whenever we get the opportunity to do that.
Yes, indeed. Well, Coach V, this was a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me here today. And I look forward to our next conversation.
It's been a privilege, Evan. Take care of yourself. Thank you.
You as well. Thanks.